I am a Black woman with brown skin. I have long braids with some colors in my hair, kind of like twists. You can see some white and I think some brownish blonde in it. I'm wearing, I guess what you can see, a black t-shirt and also a green jacket like thing. My background is, kind of like blurred out, but I'm sitting in front of a whitish gray wall. So happy to be here. I'm now going to call on the other speakers to introduce themselves and also describe themselves as well. So Miriam, I'm just going according to my screen here. Can you tell us a bit about who you are?
Yes, hello. My name is Miriam Petra Ómarsdóttir Awad, and I am from Reykjavik, Iceland. Currently sitting at the airport in Madrid, though, so apologies if there are any background noises while I'm speaking. I am the inclusion officer of the National Agency for Erasmus Plus in Iceland, but I'm also an anti-racism activist that does presentations and workshops on anti-racism in Iceland for youth workers, young people, and sometimes workplaces as well. I am Icelandic mixed Egyptian, so going to describe my look now. I am a woman in her 30s with the brown hair that's in a ponytail. I have big pink glasses. I'm a mixed Icelandic and Middle Eastern look, and my skin is light brown, and my shirt is pink and yellow with a colorful pattern on it. And I'm also wearing a wristwatch, as you can, on my hand. So yeah, that's me. Nice to be here with you.
Thanks, Miriam. Winter, you're up next.
Thank you. And I'm so happy to be here with you all. My name is Winter Agassi. I'm based in Oslo. I'm in the Google office today down at Aker Brygge for those who are based in Oslo. I am the head of HR for the commercial side of our business at Google for the Northern European region. I'm also a board member of the Norwegian Media Association, who also work to diversify the Norwegian media industry. When it comes to DE&I&B, it's my passion. And my passion is to inspire the next generation to think big and not to think, I can't. I want to show them that you can. Just put your mind into it, regardless of your background, where you come from, your perspectives. I was born and grew up in Oslo, Norway. My parents came to Norway from Eritrea and Ethiopia in the late 70s due to war. And so maybe just to describe myself, I am of East African heritage. I have long hair, brownish hair. I have sort of see-through-ish glasses, red lipstick on. My skin is brown. I have a denim, sort of light bluish shirt on. And I'm in a room with a fake view of the fjords behind me. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Winter. Greg, you're next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Fernando, and I'm the founder of the nonprofit organization New to Sweden. And we help internationals, newcomers, get integrated into the Swedish labor market here. And we sort of do that from three different ways. We help internationals directly, but we provide them like CV help and LinkedIn help and all that sort of stuff. We try to take like a holistic view to integration. So we also work with employers and we help them adjust to being able to hire people with different backgrounds. And then just recently we launched our third pillar, which is working with the community. So we launched a social integration campaign this year. We're working with 18 other organizations, and we're trying to find trying to fix inclusion here in Sweden using an intersectional lens, as we're going to be talking about later today. I am brown. I'm wearing glasses. A lot of people mistake me for being Black. I have very dark brown skin. I was born in Canada, and I was born in Montreal, grew up in Toronto, and moved here about 8 years ago because my wife is Swedish. And to continue with the physical description, I am wearing the inverse of what Chisholm is wearing today. So I'm wearing like a black sweater with a really dark green shirt underneath. And in the background, I'm sitting on a blue sofa, and there's two paintings behind me. One is, I think I'm very ambitiously calling it a painting. It's more of a kid's picture that's sitting right behind me here. And that's me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Greg. Next, I'm going to Anna Kulak.
Hi, everybody. Good morning from Greenland. It's a bit past 8 in the morning here. Just to let you know some of the differences starting out. My name is Nordic Diversity, and I work as the CEO of Greenland's Culture House. I'm situated in Nuuk, which is the capital of Greenland. I have a Danish mother and a Greenlandic father. My mother moved to Greenland when she was pregnant, so I've born and raised here in Greenland with multi-Danish, Greenlandic, mostly Greenlandic culture. I have studied culture encounters at the University of Roskilde at some point, and communications. And yes, very interested in this talk, and happy to be part of this. And I'm looking forward to listen to all of you and hear about your experiences and your knowledge. And it's interesting to be in a group where everyone has like a mix of everything, kind of different backgrounds and different views. I love that. I have brown hair, just to tell you, for those who can't see me, I have brown hair. I used to be very blonde when I was a baby, but my hair is turning darker and darker. I'm wearing glasses, big glasses, and then I have big earrings on, which are seals. They're from Alaska. And I have like a beige colored jacket on, and I don't know, can you see? I don't know. You can see maybe the black t-shirt underneath. Behind me, I have two beautiful posters made by two artists who have made art in Greenland. So it's two images of strong Greenlandic women behind me. Always nice to have someone in your back feeling supported when you're doing things like this. So happy to be here.
Thanks for sharing. And finally, Carolina, you're up.
Thank you. So great to be here today. Thank you for having me. My name is Carolina Clark. I am a global diversity, equity, and inclusion head for WS Audiology. I work for a company that produces and sells hearing aids. I am based in Denmark, just outside of Copenhagen, in a little town called Lynge. No one has ever heard of that little town, but now you know. I am a white woman in her 30s. I come originally from Poland. I have long brown hair. I have a black dress on me and an orange scarf. And I sit in a kind of like a phone booth. So there's nothing behind me, but the view is blurred. So that's me.
Thank you all for sharing. Really looking forward to this conversation. Quickly, I do want to encourage those with us and also those online on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, during the conversation, if anything resonates for you, you can always, write a statement, a comment. If you have a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat. You don't have to wait for the Q&A section to include it. And if you have a question directed at any specific panelist, please preface it with, say, for example, Miriam or Greg. If it's just a general comment, then please just toss it in as a general comment, and the lucky panelists that I appoint will have to answer it, or whoever volunteers to do so. So today we're really looking to have a conversation. So we don't have a lot of questions, but we do have, targeted prompters, and we do want to encourage the panelists to share their experiences, as well as you, our participants, to also participate in that experience sharing, also with your comments. Just quickly, for those who do not know, I want to just define what intersectionality is. I think those of us who work in this field actively, we tend to assume that everyone understands, the definitions of all this, big words. So I just want to go ahead and do so, and then jump right into questioning. So intersectionality is an analytical framework that was designed and created by Dr. Kimberley Crenshaw in 1989 to basically understand how different identities compound to shape a person's experience of the world through layers of privilege or the lack thereof. Initially, the research was founded around understanding the experiences of Black women, and it's been expanded since to include, basically people who have intersectional identities. So when we talk about identities, we're really thinking about demographic identifiers. So what you would ordinarily call diversity. So things like race, gender, disability, ethnicity, sexual orientation, education. These different aspects of our lives compound to shape how we experience the world. So for me, for example, it would be difficult to look at me and say Chisom only experiences the world as a woman, because it's difficult to separate that from, say, who I am as a mother, who I am as a business owner, my education, my background, and also my race. So for me, I am multiple hyphenated in a sense, and we all are, realistically, because we're never just one thing. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and we only look at it from, say, the gender lens from a Nordic perspective, then we're also doing a disservice to the inclusion that we want to create in society. So here we're looking to have a conversation about how do we look at things in the different countries we represent. Today we have Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Greenland represented in this room. So we'd love to have a conversation and have their perspectives shared. So jumping in, Winter, you're the lucky first. My question for you is, I think you shared with us in your introduction that, you're Norwegian and you have parents who, come from different countries, and you've had different experiences therein. So my question for you is, as a Norwegian citizen with a diverse background, and you've lived abroad, my first question is, how has DEI discourse been approached in Norway? Do you think that there are any improvements? And do these improvements take an intersectional lens? I have a second question, but I will repeat it again in case you need. And I also want to ask, based on your work at Google, which is, a small company that most of us don't know anything about, do you think that the way DEI is practiced at, say, international companies that have Nordic branches is different from Nordic companies?
Thanks, Chisom, and great questions, big questions. I think going back to something you mentioned, that I've lived abroad, which has also influenced my perspective. So I moved to London to do my bachelor's. I was only going to be there for 3 years. I ended up being there for 13 years before I eventually came back. And the Norway I left versus the Norway that I came back to were quite different. And I think if we segment them like that, then I can also talk about the journey that I've that I've seen when it comes to DEI in Norway. And I think we can't start the dialogue without talking about DEI specifically around gender. And the work that's been done within that space in Norway. You know, it's got a very proud history when it comes to gender parity, you know, going all the way back to the early 1900s, where women were able to vote equal to men, early 1980s, where we had our first female prime minister with Gro Harlem Brundtland, the numerous policies and regulations to close the gender gap, everything from paid parental leave for both parents, which I know probably exists in all of the other Nordic countries also, but to quotas in the workforce when it comes to board, having a representation of 40% women at board of directors for all publicly listed companies. And so the mainstream sort of agenda when it came to D&I was gender-based before I left. That was what was in the news. That was what was being discussed in sort of panels, etc. And then I left, was away for quite a few years in a very multicultural city where I didn't stand out because it's so multicultural. And it was almost for me personally easier to assimilate in London because of that multicultural aspect. But then I came back 13 years later, and shortly after the tragic killing of George Floyd happened, and that's when I really saw the acceleration or the expansion of the DEI agenda, not just being gender focused, but companies really realizing that DEI is so much more than gender. And all of a sudden you were seeing almost like an employer branding also of people or companies really reaching out and showcasing their DEI strategy, hiring DEI leads. You could see the shift in panel interviews. You could see it sort of on the news, etc. But I would say looking back that it's almost a little one-dimensional, because your question, Chisholm, was whether it's got the intersectional lens to it. And looking at it, I would say that it's a journey. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily at the intersectional part of the journey yet. A lot of companies are still trying to figure out how to identify D&I and how to make progress within it, but not necessarily looking at it through the lens of intersectionality. And I love the quote from Audre Lorde, who says, "There's no thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live single issue lives." Like, we are complex human beings. We have different identities, like you mentioned earlier. And so I think part of the journey, companies are going to need to understand the identities of our workforce through that lens. If not, we're not going to be able to, I think, really understand the root causes of what could be potential barriers to our D&I strategy. So it's a journey.
You think that international companies are doing a better job at this than, say, Norwegian companies? Not trying to throw you under the bus here, Winter, just personal opinion.
Well, to sort of give a blanket answer wouldn't be fair, because obviously there's some Norwegian companies that are really focusing on it, whilst there could be some international companies that are not, and vice versa. But I think the benefit, that I see being part of an international company is that some countries are further ahead when it comes to the D&I agenda. And at Google, for instance, to give that as an example, we can clearly see that it's a strategic focus for the company. We have it clearly set out in terms of our people agenda, the way we build products for everyone, and also how we show up in society with an intersectional lens also. And if we're to look at sort of the people side of it, then data is the first part to really understand our workforce, understand their experiences, understand the lens that they're coming from. And so we've just launched our annual diversity report, which also can be found online. And there you can see that we're not just looking at it from sort of a one-dimensional aspect, but we're looking at it from a intersectional lens, which gives us a clearer understanding of barriers and initiatives that we need to put in place.
And thanks for that, Winter. And this is for you and anybody else who has an insight here. I think since we're all from the Nordics or in the Nordics, we have that challenge with data, right? Where we can only collect 3 data points: nationality, age, and gender. And I think that my personal experience is that sometimes companies hide behind this as a crutch for not doing the work, because it's like, oh, I can only collect about gender, nationality, and age. Like, I can't really do anything else because what I can't necessarily measure, I can't do. So what are your thoughts in that regard? And how do you navigate, you know, this realistic and real challenge that people have, and how can, like, how is it, how is the discussion unfolding, so to say, in your countries? Anyone? Greg, I feel like you have something.
Sure. I think I agree with Winta quite a bit in terms of how the conversation has changed over like the past couple of years compared to what it was previously. When I first arrived in Sweden, I would say that diversity has always, or the word diversity has always been equated to white Swedish women, and even more specifically, white Swedish cisgendered middle class women here in Sweden, and we've sort of been ignoring the other aspects of who else is marginalized within this community. In terms of measurements, I do think sometimes companies do hide behind that crutch, Chisholm. They try to use it as somewhat of an excuse, but sometimes it's just ignorance as well. Sometimes when we speak to companies, we find out that they don't know that they can measure nationality, for instance, based on departments. You can measure how many people are foreign born within marketing and within sales and within, you can segment and you can find out this information. And I don't know how many times we found out that, no, they didn't know this at all. So what's the ulterior motive behind that? I think the more cynical person would say that, yes, they're hiding and, you know, they didn't want to find out, you know, what those, you know, like what that measurement data would lead them to. Yeah, I don't know. That's a quick answer, but if you want, I can start expanding into how things are in Sweden right now.
No, I think I have a question for you next. I think it's also worth mentioning that you do not necessarily need a person's full demographic information to actually check the level at which they feel included in the workplace. You can measure inclusion without having this data. You can measure equity without having this data. You can check how people feel within the workplace as well. And I think that is something that companies need to understand. Greg, I'm going to come to you. And since you're already on intersectionality, this is where we're staying on. I think oftentimes when intersectionality comes into, you know, discourse, it quickly turns into a us versus them debate. And then we often just revert to a one lens perspective, and then things are often siloed. So basically, in terms of progress with inclusion and equality in Sweden, what does it look like, and what are some of the challenges and the opportunities with addressing inclusion and equality from an intersectional lens in your experience?
Yeah, so I would echo a lot of what I just said. So in terms of how things used to be in Sweden, when we used to think of the word diversity and we used to equate it with gender inequality in this country, we tend to forget about the other marginalized groups that are included in that. But now I would say that is gradually changing. I'm not going to be as optimistic as Winta, I think. I think that things have gradually shifted. I think there are strong voices being heard from within marginalized groups here in this country that haven't been heard before. So I do think we're trending in the right direction. And at the same time, I don't want to marginalize what, white Swedish women are going through. There's still a lot to go through. There's still a lot to catch up on in terms of how men are treated in this country compared to women. But at the same time, we can't forget about the other groups of people. And for instance, let's say you are slightly older, like in your 50s, you're a foreign-born woman, part of an LGBTQ community, and you're coming here to this country. What are you going to be facing here compared to a white native-born Swede who's, cisgender and heterosexual? And to say that, we can equate both those differences, I think is like a false paradigm. Like they are living through different circumstances. They are experiencing things on a different level. And in fact, I'll bring up a statistic now, and I'll engage all the rest of you as well in this. What do you think the foreign unemployment rate is for, or sorry, no, let's reverse it. What's the native Swedish women's unemployment rate right now?
3%.
Sorry, say it again.
I just said 3%, random number.
It's actually pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6%.
Lower. No, so I'll stop all the guesses, but it's 3.6%. So it's high-ish, but it's relatively low compared to what we might think the national average is. But guess what it is for foreign-born women in Sweden? And this is the first quarter of 2023, so it's very recent.
15%.
Exactly. Wow, Chisholm, you're on fire. Yeah, 15.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's 4 times as high. So can we really take a look at both of those and say, okay, well, both of their problems are exactly on the same level, or can we try to find solutions based on that? And when you were asking about opportunity earlier, Chisholm, then I would say I am kind of an optimist. It may not come across during today's panel discussion, but I do believe, a rising tide is going to lift all boats. And I think we're going to talk about different interventions today that are going to be able to help other people, marginalized people, all rise up. But at the same time, we have to be able to acknowledge the actual problem. And we won't be able to acknowledge the problem until we gather data. I think, as somebody said earlier, I don't know if it was you, Winta, but we need to gather that data. We need to find out what the actual problem is, and then we can find a solution. Until we acknowledge what that problem is, that different groups of people have different kinds of problems, we're never going to get there. So do I think intersectionality is important? Yes, I do. And for that reason.
Thanks, Greg. So building on that, in terms of, so one of the things one of the questions I'm asked most often, like when I'm talking about intersectionality, working with companies, is, just the stress that there's so many identities out there. How do we provide for all of them while doing our work? So what are some ideas you have, and also others, in how this can be addressed from a workplace or even societal perspective?
Do I answer? Does anybody else?
Yes, answer. I have nobody else. Whoever, y'all are quiet. I'm going to start calling people out specifically.
Yeah, if you want, I can start. Anyway, I think there's going to be lots of interventions, and I even wrote a list of them, so I'll get to that later. But I think very quickly, I think one major point that I would like to make is that it's our belief that inclusion doesn't exist in a bubble. So you can do whatever you want within an organization, but it doesn't mean very much if you're walking into society, if you're walking into a community that doesn't reflect you or doesn't want to integrate you or welcome you in a very inclusive way. So that's actually a solution that we started this year. I was just mentioning we started this inclusion campaign. So what we're trying to do is unite all these different groups of people and bring them all under one banner so that we are talking about all the different issues facing all these different groups. And that's sort of like a wide-ranging thing. But if I was going to even become more macro about it, I would say, I think it was Winta again. I'm going to just say you said this, but identifying that, everybody has different circumstances growing up. Everybody's living under different circumstances. And that's basically the golden tenet. If we can figure that out and treat everybody as individuals, then gradually we're all going to be better for it. So it's you know, I'm looking at you, Chisholm. I have this bias that might creep in right away when I first look at you, but it's time for me to second guess that bias no matter what. And the same thing goes for absolutely everybody else. And I think as long as we can get that into our heads and start second guessing ourselves, I think that's sort of like the key base. But I'll just start it there, and then you guys, yeah, go ahead, Carolina.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what you said, Greg, because I've been thinking about the same thing, because I think in Denmark, the whole approach to intersectionality has been very influenced by countries' political and cultural context. And, you know, as lots of our Nordic neighbors, Denmark has a very strong tradition of promoting equality and social welfare. And what I have observed over the years I've been living here is that this has led to this quite unfortunate narrative that suggests that Denmark offers equal opportunities to everybody, and that equity is not a topic we should worry about, right? And this what translates into our workplace and, you know, the policies, that equity is very often not even recognized. And what I have done, and I think it's been quite successful so far, I have implemented just a very hands-on thing, some interactive talks, trainings, where we really try to talk about where am I in diversity. And this is where I try to encourage some self-reflection on the complexity of our identities. And I think that quite a lot of the times, you know, especially in Denmark, whenever we say word diversity, gender pops up into our minds, because that's what we see in the external debates. That's what we talk about quite a lot in the context of this country. So this is where I try to expand that a little bit and yeah, encourage some self-reflection. So that would be one of my advices. And the other one is to, whenever you have employee resource groups or any groups, networks within your company, to collaborate, because quite a lot of the times I see those groups only focusing on one specific topic without really understanding what the other group is doing. And that's where we get this us versus them mentality again. So that's the reason why we have some really great networks in WS Audiology, where we have all members of all ERGs working together on different projects. And that's where intersectionality gets into the picture. So in my view, that has been working.
Thank you. Miriam, you had
I just wanted to echo what Carolina is saying, because it sounded very much like she was describing the situation in Iceland. It is gender that comes up quite often, and then we overlook all the intersectional factors. And I've been doing this, you know, in my work, doing a workshop on inclusion and diversity, and I encourage the self-reflection part. I think it is really important, because a lot of the times there are policies in place that are just like fancy words on paper, and then when people get out of the office or out of the organization they're working for, they don't implement it in their daily lives, and then of course it doesn't really have it doesn't change anything. So I just wanted to, you know, echo what Carolina was saying, and that it is the same here in Iceland, or here. I'm sorry, I'm in Spain right now, but in Iceland.
Right?
No, just to add a little bit more to what both Carolina and Miriam just said, like when you're talking about ERGs, I think empowering those ERGs is also very important. It's one thing to have the ERG. It's another thing to consult them on certain decisions. We see it reflected in external matters. Like, how many times have we seen like the wrong commercial on screen where we're just like, I feel super uncomfortable watching that commercial. Why didn't they ask anybody within their organization about this? You know, empower people just, you know, for external matters, but also for internal decisions. So like, yeah, it's one thing to have ERGs, it's another thing to build on that as well.
Thank you. And thanks, Winter, for answering about employee resource group. Winter, you have something to say as well.
Yeah, no, I was also just going to add from a workplace perspective, that the education, yes, data is important, but just the education and having the psychological safety in an organization in order to really make some movement, because it's uncomfortable for people, and you have to have that psychological safe space to really make some movement on it. And so we do a lot of training, both for our leaders, but also for HR, because the HR population, which I'm a part of, we also need to be comfortable with it and how we coach our leaders on the topic. And so just yesterday, we had a session on it with the people partners in the organization. And these are mandatory training sessions that we have to do, but it's so helpful. And also with the intersectionality lens to it. And then just to echo the ERG, Employee Resource Group, and the strength of that, we also really focus on the collaboration, and that ERG leads need to think not just in terms of what they represent, but also think in terms of the layers of who they can and may represent also, and collaborate with other ERGs. So +1 to that.
Thank you all for sharing. And Kulak, I'm going to come to you. And based on our conversations, I'm pretty sure you're going to come with a different perspective in terms of, conversations around intersectionality and what is currently happening in Greenland. So I'm going to just go ahead and ask you. We know that from a Nordic construct, like we rarely think about like countries like Greenland, Åland, or Faroe Islands. So I'd hope you'd be able to share more about Greenland during this session. When we were talking, you talked about some of the challenges that Greenland faces when it comes to racism, citizenship, agency, and socioeconomic opportunity, particularly as it relates to Greenland's independence from Denmark. One of the things that struck me during our conversation was that currently the discourse in Greenland does not exist outside of the relationship with Denmark, which I thought was incredibly striking. So you're not even, at least to some degree, you can't necessarily deal with the problems internally because you're still dealing with this external problem by this, I guess, in a non-nice way to say, colonial power. So I guess one of the ways my question would be is, what are some challenges to inclusion, to equality and intersectionality from a Greenlandic perspective?
Well, yeah, first and foremost, I think I will change the perspective from what we're talking a bit now, and just talk about the frame of this, like what is the status? If for those who don't know, Greenland used to be a colony, a Danish colony, and even just that is something that I have discussed a lot with people in Denmark when I lived in Denmark, when I was studying at the university, and a comment like, well, you were not a colony, you are not really a colony. And I have had a lot of discussions about, yes, we were really a colony. We are part of the Danish kingdom now. Faroe Islands and Greenland are part of the Danish kingdom. So we are like geographically close to the North Pole, but we are part of the Danish kingdom. So our lives and our traditions are very, very different. Like our forefathers, they came from Canada. Our language, Galashisut, is almost the same as the language in Canada, in Alaska, other Inuit, even in Siberia, in Russia. We come from this. We are the same people. We come from that same people that wandered all the way to Greenland, and then we became part of Denmark, a Danish colony, and then the European, Nordic, Scandinavian culture was something that came, and now we have like a mixture. We have a Greenland that is a mixture of the traditional Inuit culture and Danish, European, Nordic culture. There are so many things, there are so many talks, and there's so much focus on this relation and this power. It's at the end of the day, it's Denmark who can say yes or no to anything that happens in Greenland. We are Danish citizens, but we are living far away from Denmark geographically. But there are like the Greenlandic language is now the official language of Greenland. That was like declared in 2010, 2009, 2010, but still the language of power and the decisions that are being made and a lot of things in the system are in Danish or would be done in Danish. So we have Greenlandic as the first language, Danish as the second language, and then English as the third language. And there are a lot of issues when it has to do with these things. And the other thing is with the gender inequality. We have big issues because of, you know, all these things we have been a colony, or ways of living has been changed like this, from being a hunter society, a traditional society, to being, trying to live like everyone else everyone in Europe or where else, studying, working, whatever. And all of that happened. So of course we have a lot of issues in society that have been created and that are results of all of these changes. And those things combined, we have a lot of issues with the gender inequality and a lot of violence in the society, and all of these things combined. And then for Greenlandic people who are living in Denmark, you're treated you are not treated as equal. We are Danish citizens, but we are still different. And I think Carolina and I was talking about last time that thought of there's no racism in Denmark kind of thing that a lot of people are saying. It's just, there is like this thought and this picture and this image of being like this great Nordic countries that are working for equality. Racism doesn't exist, and we're just we're saving the rest of the world because we don't have any of those issues in our own country. But that's just not the reality, and that's not the reality from our perspective. When you are from Greenland, you see that a lot. So, because of all of these things, you know, we have more and more people who are moving to Greenland it has always been like people from Greenland, people moving from Denmark to Greenland, but people who are moving from other countries to Greenland is not like, we don't have a lot of focus on them. Integration is also something that is still in the hands of Denmark. So when people move to Greenland, they move to Greenland. There's no like big, we don't use a lot of resources or have a plan of how to cope with that, and how to like think about even inclusion of people who are maybe not Danish and not Greenlandic.
All right.
That was a long speech, but I just wanted to like,
No, I mean, context is always important, because I think like a lot of us don't know about Greenland. I've only recently started learning about Greenland and the realities there this year, besides like a documentary I saw like a couple of years ago that I swiftly forgot about. So, I mean, the context is important. So thanks for sharing. Greg, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Because you mentioned that Greenlandic people have faced discrimination in Denmark. So maybe this question is for both you and for Carolina, I'm not sure, but is there any data on that? Like, is the Danish government even interested in trying to gather data on something like that?
I don't think they're interested in that. But you know, I don't know if it's there's any data on it. It's still like a big discussion about whether it's even there. But yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know if there is. But there are a lot of these years. There are a lot of examples and things coming up that has to do with what happened during these years, what kind of things have been done through the years. And even like if I move to Denmark and I have children, you know, if I would come from another country and move to Denmark, it would be more easy for me to get a language education for my children in the language of my like where the country I came from. Where if I move to Denmark, there is not a possibility. It's not like then there will be a possibility for my children to have Greenlandic language schooling in Denmark.
Right,
You
Carolina?
know,
No, I just wanted to answer Greg's question. And so I have not come across any data like that, but I think, and I don't know if it's the right time to address that, but I think that the representation in the DEI community in Denmark is not great, to be very, very honest. And I think that's the reason why we do not come across data like that. And I can just give you a very, very brief example of a conversation that I had with someone very close to me. It was actually last week. And we talked about our other friend that we that is actually looking for DEI opportunities in Denmark. And I was like quite frustrated in that conversation because I think she's fantastic and she's the right person to join the community and ask those questions, as you just asked, Greg, right? And she's not even coming past the interview process. And, you know, then my friend just like looked at me and said, but Carolina, what did you expect? She's not a white woman with master's degree from Copenhagen Business School or a specialist brought from the US or UK. Because, you know, we as Black and brown people who are born in Denmark, we are never part of the conversation unless it's about immigration or crime. And you know what? My jaw just dropped. And this was like a conversation where I truly understood the barriers and the biases that there are in Denmark and why we have not moved past to have those conversations as Anurag just mentioned.
I want to stay with you actually, Carolina. I'm just mindful of time, just so I can get through some of the questions, because we still have to hear from Miriam. So in staying with you, Carolina, so I think we heard about racism in Denmark, I guess maybe the denial of racism as well in Denmark. So what are the challenges inherent in the Danish society currently, and what are the opportunities to bridge in the gap?
So I think the biggest challenge is the lack of talks about equity. So having this notion that everyone has the same, you know, opportunities, and not even trying to question intersectionality and say, you know what, we don't always come from the same place. We have different traumas in our lives. We have different backgrounds. We are a very different individuals. So just because you are in this country doesn't mean that you have the same opportunities as your neighbor. So that would be the first challenge that I see quite a lot. And how to bridge that, I think it is quite important to bring some awareness and maybe move past the privilege that we have. I'm not Danish myself, but you know, if I walk around the streets, no one really sees if I'm Danish or not, because I look like 90% of the Danish population. So I see there. I think there's a lot of opportunity in creating more awareness and to talk honestly about privilege, to talk about equity, to talk about that we are not all the same. So that's just my view on it. I can see Miriam is nodding, so maybe she can recognize it as well in Iceland.
Miriam, something to add?
No, I agree with it. And I was just thinking about the talks of privilege. It seems like it's even for, at least in Iceland, I feel like it's often hard to bring up the term privilege with people because, you know, we are a small country. We were historically a poor country. Obviously, we're not anymore, but there's still, I mean, people are not all well off in Iceland. But if you start talking about privilege from the sense of, you know, you have some certain privileges because you belong to the majority, people get very defensive, and it's very kind of hard to just have the conversation in general, because me pointing out that somebody has privilege over me in some certain ways does not mean that I'm saying that their life is automatically good, but that is usually how people understand it. And I think just having more conversation about privilege and just being able to speak more openly about the different layers of it would be a very good step for at least Icelandic society, which doesn't seem to have reached, you know, that conversation, I think.
But sorry, but that's why I was asking that question about data earlier, is because I really do feel like data is going to prove the point. And I find there's like a lack of data in all the Nordics for this kind of thing. And it's really disturbing, to be honest. It's like you try to question, why is it that way? Because, like, to be honest, anytime you do any kind of study, you're probably going to find out that there's inequities that exist. Almost every single study will prove that, no matter what you are. You could be a woman, and if you compare yourself to men, you're going to have a lack of equity all across the board. If you're a person of color, you're going to find that against white people. If you're a person who's foreign born compared to somebody who was born here, you're going to find that. So why are we so I don't even know what the word is, but why are we tiptoeing around the fact that we don't want to gather some more data? And that's why I was asking that question earlier, Arna Kuluk. I'm sorry, I probably mispronounced your name, but excellent. So, like, you know, because I'm sure if they gathered the data in Denmark, they're going to find out that Greenlandic people are mistreated in Denmark. So why aren't we gathering that data in the first place?
Maybe it's a protection.
I think it's because people don't want to know. Because as you just said, Shisam, you need to do something about it. And it's, you know, I've seen actually some really solid data, and it was on people of color in Denmark and opportunities and access to different things. And, you know, the first question people would come with is like, but is this data really real? Like, where did it come from? And then all this skepticism and questions are starting. And then at the end of that conversation, you just don't know what to say. At least that is my challenge from time to time, the skepticism.
I read a research, I think it was done by a researcher either in Denmark or Sweden. And it was basically talking about this limitation with data, how on one hand, it looks like it's to protect people's identity, and but on the other hand, it's also to protect the system in a way. Because by the time you start digging into data, according to this research, you know, you start seeing the disparities and the inequities and the challenges within the society. And once those data is available, then you have to do something about it, because you can't say, oh, we live in this region flowing with milk and honey, there's no problem here. So I think that could be one way to look at it. And just quickly, yesterday we were having a conversation, I think it was Shantani and I on my team, having a conversation with a really big company here in Norway, but it's an international company. And, you know, we kind of like, when we talk about things beyond gender, it's considered political, you know, and I think that's also one of the ways that it's found challenging, is that I don't want to talk about intersectionality. I don't want to talk about like gay people, because those are all political conversations. Those are not conversations we should be having. The government, who we trust very well, has taken care of all of it, so to say. I saw some hands, and then I need to move on to Miriam. Yes, Anna Crook.
I saw that Johanna had a comment about Sami people. So, well, both Sweden, Norway, Finland, all these places, you know, it's, yeah, Sápmi is, you know, all over the Nordic, and it's not something that is talked a lot about. What I'm thinking is that even just like taking this on a level when you just talk about Nordic diversity is also just acknowledging that the diversity is in the countries already, you know. I think it was when I had the first meeting with Shisem and the others, at that time, there are big activistic demonstrations and actions in Oslo going on with Sami people because their rights are being neglected, human rights at the same time that you're talking about this, but you just don't want to look that way. You don't want to see that. And that's the same thing with Greenland also. When you talk about just the Nordic constructions and being Nordic, you think Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and then there are the others. And like when I'm in these meetings and things, Nordic context is like, oh, we can speak Nordic and everyone will understand. But Greenlandic is just so different. Icelandic is so different. If in Finland, Finnish is also very, very different. But what you mean is that you mean Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish, because they look like each other, but you feel like exactly Stine has written White Guild. I often feel like when I'm in a Nordic context and well, there's Greenland is represented here, that you're the guild. You're like, yeah, you're part of this. You're the Nordic, but you don't really fit in. You're like, they don't really know how to have this, because it ruins the common picture of the Nordic.
Right.
In a way, if you have in the Nordic countries, we are like this.
Right.
And often that sentence that there are a lot of us who don't fit into that sentence.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's not, I just think that we should be able to talk about it. If we're able to talk about it and not just shish it, then we can okay, well, be curious about, okay, what does it mean then? Can we expand exactly the Nordic diversity? Can we expand the picture of being Nordic?
Right.
And I think that's what
Sorry, if I can interrupt you, I will come back to what can be done. So I just want to get Miriam's perspective on Iceland, and then we can just have a full discussion around what are some of the way forward within, to I guess address this challenge. Miriam, coming to you, since you're Icelandic and you have perspective from growing up there as well. You've shared, I think when Carolina was speaking about having the same experience with centering intersectionality in an Icelandic perspective. And when we spoke last time, we talked about how there might also be an erasure of different identities or groups that are historically underrepresented in the Icelandic society. So my question essentially for you is, why are some identities, why is it difficult for us to talk about say race or ethnicity, but it's okay to talk about gender, for example? And also, what challenges do you think are unique to Iceland, or is it more or less the same with everything you've heard here so far today?
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting myself. But yeah, so I studied during my master's degree, I was doing an anthropological research on self-identities in Iceland and the effects of prejudice on the self-identities of people with mixed backgrounds. And it kind of feels like often there's no space to be Icelandic and something else. You either have to kind of pick and choose, are you more Icelandic or more something else? Because if you're more something else, it doesn't really fit. So unlike in some other countries where you might have hyphenated identities where you are Italian American or whatever, but Icelandic just doesn't have room to be, you don't have room to be anything else. But interestingly, if your background is from specific countries, people will just automatically assume you as a belonging. So if you are a person with a parent that is Norwegian and then a parent that is Icelandic, you will be understood as Icelandic. You don't have to claim it, but if your background is in any sort of way a bit further away from the Icelandic kind of context, then you are perpetually a foreigner. So the identities are kind of, there's no room to be Icelandic and something else. And I think it is often just in the way that the Icelandic national identity was kind of constructed during the independence struggle, where we kind of had to, like, and this is very interesting to look at in terms of what Arna Kukluk was saying, because we were part of the Danish kingdom, but the difference between Iceland and Greenland, for example, is that Icelanders were able to kind of put themselves on a pedestal as like a civilized country, a white country, essentially. And though, because that kind of worked, and there was no, like, I mean, there was an independent struggle, but it was more on a like a cultural level. There was no, war or anything. We became independent on the notion that we were a civilized country, and in that context of that time period, meant as a white country. So I think it just unconsciously colors what we see as what it means to be Icelandic even today. And because multiculturalism is, I mean, Iceland has always been connected with the world. We've always had, seafarers and fishermen coming, but it's a more recent thing than in the rest of the Nordics. So the conversation is just a lot younger. So we've never really had to be like, we had to deal with our colonial past, because our colonial past is more as a victim of colonialization, even though we were benefiting from it indirectly as being a predominantly white European country or culture. So this is something that is, really colors the situation in Iceland, and how we don't have room or space for people to be Icelandic and something else, and that being celebrated. I think what needs to happen in Iceland is just that we give space for people to, share their intersectional identities on a broader spectrum. There is like almost 25% of the population in Iceland now is either immigrants, children of immigrants, or people with a mixed background like me. And that is a huge part of the population, but you don't really see it reflected in, the people who are managing companies or in politics, or, anyone with the position of privilege or power. It's not reflected. And I think it would just be healthy for the Icelandic population to just see that this is there. It is actually a big part of our vibrant community. And the second question you were asking if I think there are some things that are unique to Iceland, and I think that is just the way that it is such a recent thing. We are obviously a very small country, so of course it's kind of like you have a village in some of your other countries that is trying to manage everything for an entire country. So it's just a struggle to, like, I think the fertile ground and the willingness to do better has started to show, but we don't really have the means on our own. It would be really beneficial for us to learn from others and bring in expertise from abroad, because we're all kind of swamped with, just trying to manage all of it. I don't know. I hope this answers your question. I'm trying to get all my points in there.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Winter.
Thank you for that, Mary. I was, because my question was whether you knew what the percentage of ethnic minority groups was in Iceland. You answered that with the 25%, which came as a surprise to me. I didn't know that it was that high. But do you, just like we saw in Norway, and I'm sure in the other Nordic countries, did you see any type of change after the George Floyd murder?
Yes, actually I did, because I've been, my entire life has kind of been colored by all these experiences growing up, and I felt when I was younger, I felt like I was kind of, in a silo, like screaming alone, like, and the only other people who were like trying to get attention to these issues were other people with foreign backgrounds. But I think after George Floyd, we could actually see like a shift where, people were taking it more seriously. And I now see more Icelanders with an Icelandic background actually taking active part in the dialogue and wanting to know more about it. And I think one of the good things that came from it is that, people were like, oh yeah, maybe there is racism in Iceland. And, we cannot blame it on the fact that, like, the only reason why we have racism is that now we have immigrants. Like, it's just always been there. And I think that's a shift that just is taking place, but very slowly. So for someone who's like, for me, who's been trying to get the shift to happen for a longer time, and maybe I'm a bit impatient, but yeah, it did definitely changed, because yeah, people were more willing to actually speak about the topic, and maybe they had more means too, because there were more articles, more, you know, news segments, so you have more vocabulary on it. So yeah.
Sorry, Winter, go on.
No, I was just going to say a bit similarities to Norway, but in Norway, it's 16% of the population has an ethnic minority background. And a recent survey just showed—
Is that 60%?
16, 16, not 16.
Okay.
16. And to be accurate, we're like 15 point, but above 15.5. So I've just rounded it up even to 16%. And a recent survey just showed that it's only amongst the top 50 like biggest companies in Norway, only 0.22% have an ethnic minority background of the leaders within those companies. I mean, yeah. So we have a way to go, but it sounds like a lot of our challenges cross borders.
Definitely. I saw that article. I saw that finding as well. I was like, wow. I mean,
And it was like one.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
If I can just expand, oh, sorry, Greg. I just wanted to
ahead,
explain the Icelandic numbers. So I think it's like 16 or 17% are immigrants, and then the children of immigrants are another. I think it reaches up to almost 20, and then the rest are people with a mixed background. So of course, in those numbers, there are people that might have mixed, like Icelandic and Norwegian backgrounds that doesn't, you might not get portrayed in society as a foreigner, but in those numbers are not people who have like grandparents from abroad, like my siblings' children. So I'm going to mute myself now because of the airport announcement, but just to expand on the numbers.
I just want to add to the numbers talk, because the Swedish numbers I find are often understated as well. So a lot of people use like the general population of the entire country, and they use those numbers as percentage points, but then they try to set those as diversity targets. But it's not really that. You have to take the working population and look at the percentage there. So like the general number that's bandied about in Sweden, it's like, okay, 20% of the country is foreign born. But that's not really the case. It's actually 25% are of working age. So 1 in every 4. It's 37% with people with foreign backgrounds. And in the city of Stockholm, it's almost 50%. It's almost 50% of the Stockholm region is foreign born, or the child of someone foreign born. But nobody realizes those numbers, and you don't see it. And I don't think we're going to have the time to talk about this today, but the housing segregation that goes on in Stockholm. So you don't see it in central Stockholm, but you see it in the suburbs. And that's something else, but maybe that's for another day.
Right. No, very interesting. And I think similar things are also happening in Norway as well. But yes, topic for another day. I do want to bring this whole conversation together, and can I just focus on, I guess, the last question I have for you all in terms of what are some of your top tips? And I guess we can try to keep this section brief because we have some questions in the chat that we need to go through. So if each of you have one tip, and I know that's hard, so let's just limit it to one. One tip on how your respective country can incorporate in an intersectional lens to amplify inclusion, diversity, and equality. I'm going to just go through the slide here. So I'm going to start with Miriam. One tip.
One tip. Put in the work. Each individual needs to put in the work. It's often on the shoulders of those who are being marginalized to inform everyone else. And I think it's just on everybody's shoulders to educate yourself, read articles, read books. That would be my tip. I don't know how expanded, I feel like the society would just benefit from that if we would all put in the work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Winter.
Only one. I think my tip would then be skewed towards the companies, because I think there's a lot of power in companies. If we can get them to shift, they'll have a big influencing power. And that would just be understanding the sense of urgency that our societies are just becoming more and more diverse. And at the end of the day, all companies want to flourish. All companies want to do well. And if we can see the benefit of having truly diverse organizations where people, and that means being able to be yourself, bring your true self to work so that you can spend your energy on being creative, being innovative, not think about how you need to show up because you can't be yourself. If companies can truly understand that if you can create a culture where people can bring their true self to work, then that will make your organization richer.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for that, Winter. Greg?
I really like that. So I'm reminded of a quote. No, there's a quote that we use in a lot of our workshops, and it's basically, it's a quote from John Rawls. He wrote this book called The Veil of Ignorance back in 1971. And it was just a very simple quote that I think is pertinent for us today. It's, if you can design the world without knowing what body or what circumstance you were born in, how would you design it? And I think that's really important. And I'm paraphrasing, so those of you who are looking for the exact words, it's probably not exactly true, but it's very close to that. And I think it's incredibly important, not just for our society, like I was saying before. Like, I don't think inclusion exists in that bubble. I think we need to start thinking more holistically in terms of our entire society, in terms of our entire country. But you can even take that and extract it or extrapolate it and use it within your organization as well. Does every single system and structure and process, if you had to just randomly pick a person, would you think it's fair for that particular person? And then go through everything that way. And I think perhaps if I could choose one Chisholm, then that would be it.
Thanks, Greg. And it's a really good one. Anna Kulak?
I think that for all of the Nordic countries, not just one, there should be a more open and curious, be more open and curious to the population of what population is that you have in the Nordic. What are we? Not just saying that this is this and we've always been like that. And being more curious about the people, and also here in Greenland, to be more curious and not just, are you wrong or right? Are you Greenlandic or not Greenlandic? Or kind of that way of thinking that everything is black and white kind of thinking. But being more curious, being open, and actually seeing who is it that is living in this country.
Right. Thanks a lot. And Carolina?
Great tips, by the way. I'm mentally taking notes from all of you, so that's great inspiration. So the tip that I have is around representation. And as I mentioned before, I truly hope that in Denmark, we can be better at diversifying our own DEI community. So a lot of the times when I see on LinkedIn, we are signing a charter or we are doing this and that, I see a room full of white Danes. So I would really hope that we can include the rest of the Danish society in those discussions. For example, having someone from Greenland with that living experience challenging, whatever we are doing. So it's not me times 10 deciding of what is right and what is wrong. So representation to me is just the tip number one. Make room. And yeah, that would be it, I guess.
Thank you all for sharing and for such fantastic tips. Also took some notes here. I think, I guess just to close it out, I tend to think, and I think we know, the whole Nordic countries, they kind of think of themselves, and in many ways they are an egalitarian society. And for those of us that have the law of Jente, where you're not supposed to be different from anyone and we're all the same. And I think there's something glorious about that. But, recognizing the challenges that people face or the privileges that people have, does not mean that we are not the same. We're all the same in value, but we have different experiences. And that is why an intersectional lens is very important. You know, there's no point pretending that for me, who I'm not visually impaired, giving me the same computer as you would give to somebody who's visually impaired. So how do we actually meet people where they are and create a sense of belonging? So I definitely, I want to thank you all for sharing. I'm going to jump quickly into the questions because we have 10 minutes left and yeah, quite a number of questions. So hopefully I would just address this and first come, first serve, or I will call out if y'all are shy. The first question we have here, and I probably want to change that a bit, is in what ways do you see intersectionality being actioned in your country? Who wants to take that? So what is a specific thing that is done right in terms of taking an intersectional perspective? It could be in your country, it could be in your workplace. Any takers? Carolina?
I can take that one. So what I've seen that has been quite successful is in the past, whenever big companies or even public companies would create some kind of like a charter that everyone would sign, that would always be around female in leadership positions. But recently, I've seen those charters changing to inclusion and equal access for everyone. So this is where they try to describe intersectionality and go away from this very binary gender kind of like way of thinking. So I think that has been a really good initiative in the Danish society, at least.
All right, thank you. So moving on to the next question here. As all of you have mentioned today, intersectionality, privilege, and power are not talked about much in the Nordics. What can we do on an individual level to start having these conversations? Any takers?
Oh, go ahead, Miriam.
Well, I think it's just very good for people to like, I think it's a great question because I think it's good that people maybe start just analyzing their own privileges and then mentioning it to the people around them. Like, did you realize like it's a privilege for me to do this? And you know, because if you're not aware of your privileges, then you're not really, you know, you're just blind towards the inequalities that are there as well. So if you want to change, you know, something around you, instead of maybe pointing out all the inequalities, you can also point out your privileges and just acknowledge them and be like, what can I do with them? I think maybe that would be a good place to start.
Right. I'm reminded of Michael Jackson's song, Man in the Mirror. Based on what you said, great song.
Oh, the best
exactly.
song.
Okay, next question here is.
Oh, can I just quickly jump in then?
Of course.
In terms of the responsibility, I was also thinking, I mean, in terms of the question, what can we do ourselves? You know, as a company at Google, we always have to. So when we partner, if I have to be part of a panel, for instance, as part of my sort of approval form, I have to tick the box that the panel is diverse. Like there's always an expectation that whomever we engage with, that diversity lens has been taken into account. And so what can we do as individuals? I'm thinking, if you have a preference for a restaurant, or it might be a newspaper, or whatever you do, just have that lens on too and speak up. Maybe, you know, if it's a specific newspaper and you don't see that diversity for that newspaper, speak up, and maybe choose, just like we do in terms of general sustainability, maybe have that lens on and choose sort of the companies that you want to collaborate with or use.
And sorry, Chisholm, I know you want to go to the next question. Can I just add very quickly?
Yes.
Push for data as much as you possibly can. We can see how data can really help us with any sort of argument that comes up. Data is incredibly useful. So push for it as much as you can. And I understand it's hard to push for political data or like, you know, more societal level data, but you can easily push for organizational data. Like Chisholm was saying at the top of the presentation, go for inclusion surveys within your company and then do something with that data afterwards as well.
Thanks, Greg. On data, I'm reminded of the quote, what gets measured gets done. And to what Winter was saying, I was also thinking about allyship. You know, like, how do you show up as an ally, recognizing your privileges and also kind of like actioning that change with yourself. Okay, the next question here is, what is so scary about talking about political issues and privilege? Who wants to take that? In the Nordics, from the Nordic perspective? Who wants to jump into that hot soup?
I don't mind jumping in, but I don't think I have the right perspective on this.
Hey, we're here sharing our perspectives, and I think they're all valid. So go for
No,
it.
I think I don't know if you said it earlier, Chisholm. I think there is a fear of this power shift that might occur within our societies, but there shouldn't be that fear. We should really be thinking about the old saying, culture add versus culture fit. You want to have more culture add within our organizations, but within society as well. So let's not be scared of that. And it's important to acknowledge our privilege, because otherwise, what sort of society do we want to have here in our country? Anyway, sorry, I can rant about this for like 2 hours, so I'm not going to stop. But if anybody else has like a more balanced view, please go ahead.
Right. Thanks a lot, Greg. Next question here is about Oppression Olympics. So it's from Snow. It says, regarding privilege, oftentimes people make comparisons that one group has it worse or better than the other group. So how can we talk about privilege, oppression, intersectionality without turning it into an Oppression Olympic? Any takers? Kulak, go on.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you feel like that you're being judged and you're not being heard, and that what you're saying is not being recognized as truth, it's more difficult to have that talk. So to be able to do that, you have to like have a space or feel like that you can actually do it, and I think that's also what you're saying, that it's not like a competition of who has it worse, but even feeling like that there is an okay room, and that you can say what your experiences are and what you're feeling and where you are, without anyone saying, well, that's not truth, that's not really like being recognized. Being open in the dialogue is important.
Right. Thanks a lot for sharing. I'm just mindful of time here, but I do want to say thank you all for your insights. Really valuable. Just a thing on Oppression Olympics. I think what you were saying is just recognizing that there's room for all of us and the pie is big enough to be shared, and also recognizing that multiple realities can coexist. So if we recognize that 5, 10, 500 things can happen at the same time, hopefully we have more grace and empathy when we engage with people and not quickly go into the Oppression Olympics. There's a last question here about like what are some great initiatives happening. So here's my prompt for those of you here. Please follow everyone here on LinkedIn. They do really amazing work. They're often engaged in podcasts, in events or activities and initiatives within their organizations and otherwise that are very impactful. So they are movers and shakers, I believe, in this space. So follow them, follow their work, and learn from what they're doing. I do want to take this time to thank each and every one of you, the participants, for being here with us and those online. Miriam, Winter, Greg, Arakulak, and Carolina, thank you so much for taking out your time in preparing for this and being here today with us. Time is precious, so I very much value your insights. And I know we could sit here for another 2 hours, going at this. I really appreciate your time. And thank you all for being here. And I can't believe I'm actually kind of done an hour, a minute before, not an hour before. That's reaching for it. But thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. And I hope that, I know we just scratched the surface, but I hope that this sparks some really good thought process for those of us in attendance. I know that it will for me. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chisholm.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.